Hi, my name is Bob Jablonsky with Jablonsky Tax Relief. And at Jablonsky Tax Relief, we help taxpayers solve their IRS problems. Today, I'm going to talk to you about some feedback that I get from my clients who've tried to deal with the IRS directly. And these are 5 common frustrations that they run into. So about half of my clients probably who I work with initially started to work with the IRS directly, and they just found that they ran into, from their perspective, a nightmare. And I'm going to summarize like 5 of their common frustrations, and then tell you why a competent tax resolution professional might be able to help you. So here are the 5. First of all, the endless wait times and the automated phone queues that they run into. The second is the lack of clarity and sometimes inconsistent information they receive. The third is the lengthy response times that they get when dealing with the IRS. The fourth thing is complex documentation and form requirements. And the fifth thing is intimidating notices and what they at least feel are intimidating negotiating tactics from the IRS. So I'm going to cover each of these 5. The first one we talked about is common endless wait times and automated phone systems. So taxpayers, first of all, are going to have to figure out the right number to call, which can be a challenge in and of itself. And if they do, they'll next get into a queue, an automated phone system, where they're going to have to pick the right connection. Hopefully they've done that right. And if they do, and if they're lucky enough to get to that point, they've now gotten into this queue where they might wait 30, 60 minutes or more. Sometimes taxpayers are unlucky enough, and I find myself calling the IRS being unlucky enough to either find out they want to transfer me somewhere else, they can't hear me, or I can't hear them, or I get disconnected. And that, to a taxpayer, you just spend an hour on the phone, you're really frustrated to begin with, and you walk away with nothing. Really frustrating. The second thing is the lack of clarity and inconsistent information. IRS employees are trained with their own methodology. They understand the jargon of the IRS, the form numbers, all of those things, or they usually do. And the typical taxpayer is not, and they walk away confused from that conversation. And also, they may call again to another agent and get a completely different response, whether that's from miscommunication or that's from a lack of education on the IRS's side. But for whatever reason, they may find themselves with inconsistent information. So what do? They're like kind of frozen at that point. The third thing is, okay, you figured out what you want to do. Maybe you're responding to an audit, or maybe you're responding to a collection notice, and maybe you're sending in information. Well, it may take a long, long time for the IRS to get back. And during that time, taxpayers hopefully are being communicated to, but usually not to their comfort, and it's not easy to get an answer. So they find themselves unsure if the IRS has received their information. They might not resend it, and they may find the IRS never got it, or B, they may resend it and find that just slows everything down even further. So there's the lengthy response times. There's the complex and form and documentation requirements. So let's say, the IRS has a lot of forms and a lot of different form numbers they can use. And I'll give you an example in a moment. And then there's the documentation requirements. What is the IRS looking for, and does it make sense to you? So with the forms, an example might be the IRS needs a form 433. Well, a form 433F is what, if you're calling an 800 number, will need. And they're usually going to take that by phone. They're not looking for the form itself. On the other hand, if you're dealing with a revenue officer, they're going to want a 433A. If you are an individual, they're not going to take it over the phone. They're going to want the form completed and signed. And a 433 if you are a business, no, not a sole proprietor, but a separate business. So this could be really confusing. And if you've ever seen a 433A or B, they're pretty complex to get through, and they probably raise a lot of questions along the way. Let's say you're getting audited and the IRS is asking for documentation for an expense. They try to tell you what they need, but often taxpayers don't understand it. They might think that it's sufficient to just give a copy of a credit card statement or a bank statement. And the IRS likely will say that's not enough and just reject the documentation and reject the expense. So you should know exactly what they're asking for and understand their forms and their documentation requirements. And then finally, intimidating IRS notices and negotiation. Okay, so you get notices and you see all over, we may levy you, we may file federal tax lien. Really scary to the taxpayer, and they often don't understand their rights, what they can do, or what they need to do to resolve it to make sure they are not levied or a federal tax lien filed. Sometimes, just getting on a phone with an IRS employee and hear them saying levy or lien can intimidate, frustrate, or anger a taxpayer. And none of those things are good when dealing with the IRS. So how can a tax resolution help, or at least a competent tax resolution help? Well, first of all, they can reduce your taxpayer's anxiety and stress by being the bridge in between the IRS and the taxpayer. They will interface, if they're good, with the IRS directly. The second thing is they should understand the taxpayer's rights, what all the taxpayer's rights are, and make sure that they are representing that taxpayer correctly and not letting the IRS take away any of their rights. The third thing is hopefully they're going to understand the complex tax codes, the notices and forms. Not everyone does. Not everyone knows everything, but at least they should be able to find the answer if it comes up. Fourth thing is that tax professional should be able to provide clarity and guidance to the taxpayer. They should keep the taxpayer informed as to what's going on clearly and in using layman's English language that the taxpayer can understand. And finally, if you get a good, there's no guarantees, but most likely that tax professional is going to be able to negotiate favorable terms for debt repayment versus you doing it yourself. They're going to understand all your options, be able to communicate it to you, and get the best solution for your unique situation. Hopefully you found this valuable. If you did, please like the video, help the algorithm, and let more people watch this video. If you are not a subscriber, please do so today. If you do have an IRS problem, please feel free to leave a comment below if you have a quick question or thought on this matter. If you need professional help, give me a call, 954-715-7285, or you can get directly on my calendar. It's in the description below. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you all have